You're in the water loop.
Welcome to Waterloop, the podcast helping water leaders to discover solutions and drive change. I'm the host, Travis Loop. Analysis has shown a significant lack of diversity in the sources cited in media coverage. This means failing to include Black, Latino, and Indigenous water experts, and to present the stories of people within impacted communities. The Color of Water platform was created to counter this trend. It's an online directory that journalists can use to connect with a diverse set of experts, as discussed in this episode with Jose Aranda, Relationships Manager for the Water Hub. Jose explains how the Color of Water is training these experts to bolster their skills, sharing where they appear in media coverage, and aiming to add their voices to policy discussions and professional gatherings. Before starting, a quick mention that Waterloop is a nonprofit media outlet, and this episode is made possible by support from Springpoint Partners. Now to the conversation.
You're in the water loop.
Jose, I'm glad to have this conversation with you. I'm kind of a former journalist and I guess still kind of a quasi-journalist here. So I think it's awesome that you guys built this directory, this Color of Water directory, to help put water experts out there that have more diverse backgrounds than usual. Before we dive into what it is, how it works, all that stuff, could you talk about the problem, the long-running lack of diversity in media coverage, especially in the sources that media goes to for covering water issues?
Yeah. So glad to be here, and thank you so much for the invitation. I think this is a long-standing situation or the lack of diversity in water coverage in the media. But for us, we became more aware of this back in 2019. The Water Hub conducted what we call a media landscape analysis. So we were trying to see what were the main topics that were being covered in the media around water, and what were the trends. And from that analysis, it was very clear that there was the stories of the communities that were impacted the most were being left out. So the stories of communities, Black communities, Latino communities, minority communities, and of course, low-income communities, right? And we also realized that the voices that were being featured were pretty homogeneous. And that was, I think, not only in the media, but was also a reflection of the water field at large. And so what I mean is that we were seeing the same type of water expert being featured in the media. And that is mostly, white men with degrees in water-related fields, hydrology, engineering, that were either part of water management institutions or were part of policy making or decision makers. And so, if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense, that there's a correlation between the water field not being very diverse and the voices being featured in the media also not being very diverse. And so these two things, the conversation and the actual decision making and management kind of feed each other. And so there was this loop. And so as a result, the communities that were being left out and that are still being left out, although we're trying to change that with the Color of Water and with a lot of efforts from many different organizations. But the outcome of that was that the communities that are on the front lines of water and climate impacts do not see themselves in those stories and therefore do not connect, and there's no resonance in those stories. So like when you see a film, or when you see a story in the media that is not reflecting your vision and your experience of reality, and therefore you're basically disengaged from that story.
It doesn't provide the real picture to audiences out there also, right? If stories don't include more diverse viewpoints and stories about these other parts of the community, then the audience of that newspaper, TV outlet, whatever, they're not getting properly educated either on what's happening out there in water. They're kind of losing out too. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and I would even go further and say that not only then, therefore, there is a misunderstanding of the problems that we're facing in regards to water, but we're also missing the solutions. We're also missing what are the solutions, and we're leaving out the people that are experiencing those problems and that are devising the solutions with their communities, which is key for a broader sense of what we are, just to have a good sense of the scope of the problem and what it takes to actually contribute to the solutions. We need to know what it is. And so I think that's, you hit the nail, is not only changing or providing an incomplete picture, but that incomplete picture does not allow us to actually handle and have a sense of what the problem is and how can we solve it.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. So, the Color of Water, talk to me about this platform that you all built to try to address this problem.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, the Water Hub conducted this landscape analysis, and we also realized that journalists were also going to the same sources that were already, to some extent positioned or have had, some sort of validation as experts. And so there was a lack of, diversity of sources. And so we wanted to make it easier for journalists, because, if you step into the shoes of a journalist, you're probably, you have a due date that it's coming. You need to get, the stories and make the interviews and get as much information as you can, but you don't have all the time to go into, so it's probably easier for you to go to the experts that have already been featured, right? And so we wanted to make it easier for journalists and for reporters to connect with a more diverse set of experts. And that brought quickly the idea of we should also include not only what are the traditional experts in water, so meaning policy or engineering experts, but also community experts and indigenous knowledge and traditional ecological knowledge holders, and just lived experience. So many people deal directly with challenges like flooding or combined sewer overflows or drought. And so there's a lot of knowledge from those frontline communities that is not acknowledged as expertise, unbelievably. And so we wanted to expand what an expert in water looks like. And so initially we built this speakers bureau, so a list of this spokespeople, and we were able to share that list with different journalists. And then we built a Twitter list, and that had a lot of success. Just having a place where people could look into, experts' handles and see what they were saying, what they were talking about, what they were posting and publishing. And from that experience in Twitter, we started to build an online directory, which we launched last year, at the end of last year in November, and which has been a great success. So we now have an online directory. It's a website where you can browse through our online directory and look at the profiles of all of the different experts that are featured in the directory, which now are over 100 experts from different parts of the country, from different communities, from all different fields. We have experts working in the government, working in NGOs, working in research, working with frontline communities, doing water monitoring, doing ecological research, and of course doing advocacy and organizing. And so it's meant to make it easier for journalists to get a sense of what are the voices that are bringing in insights, solutions, new thinking, innovation, but also that are speaking the truth about what's happening in the communities. And so what we've learned is that it's not only journalists and reporters that are interested. It's also the field at large. There's I would say hunger. There's an appetite to learn more about different experts, including people of color experts in water. And there's also an interest from policymakers to hear these stories. There's an interest in, from decision makers, as decision makers are also trying to come up with bills and solutions for water problems. The stories of frontline communities and the stories of our experts directory are also super relevant.
Yeah, I love that point. A lot of it's not just in the media, but also at a lot of conferences you go to, right? Water conferences, the big meetings and stuff. You have a lot of the same speakers up there on the podium. And a lot of times there's a big lack of diversity. And so this is a great resource for finding different speakers for those things too.
Yeah, I mean, one of the key learnings from early when we were building the spokesperson, the speakers bureau and the Twitter distribution list was that we got the feedback that people in the directory felt tokenized to some extent, and that being featured in the directory felt somewhat transactional in the beginning. And so we shifted our approach, and so the essence of the directory is not necessarily to grow the directory and to have more and more people's profiles and just feature them and be sort of like an agent, but we really focus on relationship building and supporting what our members are doing and what their needs are, and what kind of support do they need. Of course, with limited capacity, but we try to do our best to show up and to learn from their work and their voices, and that's been not only very rewarding for us, and of course, hopefully, it feels better for them, but that's really enabled us to be better advocates and to make stronger and better pitches of their voices and their work to journalists, and so that I think adds to a broader ambition to step away from extractive journalism, right? Which is what we try to do is to invite journalists to also make relationships with the people in our directory and to go deeper and look into their stories and into their communities, and not just use their voices and then move on to the next stuff, which is something that we know it's hard for journalists as well, but that's the spirit of The Color of Water, is to go deeper into relationships and to actually build connections and build community, and with a lot of respect and appreciation for all the stories that and for all the problems and solutions that are being devised as well.
How do you identify the people that are featured on here? How do you determine that they are an expert, that they're a good speaker and, should be part of this tool?
Yeah, that's a great question. The short answer is we really don't. We let the spokespeople in our directory self-identify as an expert and self-identify as a spokesperson. So people can register to be part of the directory voluntarily, and so in our website there's a form for anyone to join the directory. The only filter that we have is that it's for people of color, and that's because people of color have been left out of the conversation, and we're trying to balance that, right? But besides that, we welcome anyone who wants to tell their story and wants to bring their perspective and their community or their discipline and into the conversation. And so what I think has happened is that this has become more of a word of mouth suggestion and invitation. We do invite experts that we, through our relationship and through our partnerships, we think would be great to feature, but we mostly leave it to these experts to have their interest, because not everyone, not all the experts want to be a spokesperson, right? Like not everyone wants to be in front of a camera or talking to a reporter or providing an interview or being featured in a conference or in a podcast. So I think, and we can definitely, part of the Color of Water is building those capacities, right? So we also, the Water Hub, and that's a big part of what I do, is we provide support to all the members in the directory to build their communication capacities, whether that's writing an op-ed or being in front of a camera or drafting some talking points or thinking about a communication strategy, which are key skills to have as we navigate climate and water challenges. Is how can we convey our messages in a compelling way to basically gather buy-in and get political will and also the technical knowledge to devise more solutions. And so it's voluntary, and what we do try to do is to cover all the main water issues, right? Like if there's a water issue that we feel it's important to have a voice that can speak to, then we proactively reach out to gather more expertise around that. So, for example, PFAS is an alarming and emergent issue, and we've reached out to have more experts on that. And there's of course all kinds of long-standing problems like access to drinking water, access to clean water, and of course, water investments, water infrastructure, lead pipe replacement, green infrastructure, storm water management, water quality, a long-standing, a long list of issues, and we try to make it easier for people who are looking for an expert on a specific field to find it. So we have a set of filters where people can find, by state, by region, by ethnicity, if you're interested in race and ethnicity, by gender, and by topic, so that you can go into the topic in a certain region and find who is an expert on that.
As we're talking, I actually pulled it up on my end and was just scrolling through it again. And I love that searchability. I was going to ask you about like how to practically use it. And it's awesome because you can go in, you can see all the people in one big list and go in and look at them. But then you have those filters that you mentioned: expertise, gender, location, race, ethnicity, etc. Journalists can download the whole directory and have that. I see a lot of people I recognize in here, and I know are great voices and experts, so that's awesome. And then I see so many people that I don't know, but now I'm going to click on a lot of these folks and learn more about them, especially for this podcast. Could you talk a little bit about some of the other pieces here? There's like the reflections section, kind of the stories and what that part's all about.
Yeah. And just to echo what you said, one thing that is great about the directory from my perspective is that we have not only a diversity of topics, a diversity, of course, of ethnicities, but also a diversity of types of expertise. So from indigenous knowledge holders to, post PhD and people doing in-depth research to people that are in water boards making decisions and drafting policies, legislators. And we also have a diversity in terms of how long they've been working on water issues or involving water issues, from a graduate student to people with more than 30 years doing litigation around tribal water issues. So I think that's part of what makes the directory offer really a breadth and a depth of knowledge and expertise that I think is unique. And yeah, one thing that we wanted to take advantage is, since we have and we keep track of what's happening in the media, we feature the articles where our spokespeople have been featured or that they have authored. And I think that's relevant because it's important for folks to not only have a short description of what they do and then links to their websites and to their LinkedIn accounts or to their Twitter handles, but also to see what their voice is and what their messages are. And so we try to keep track of what they're doing, which is a considerable task. And the purpose of that is so that people can look at what their voice is saying, basically. And so having articles that they publish and having articles where they've been featured also gives journalists and reporters an idea of what their tone, what their interest, what their level of expertise is. And it also, in full honesty, gives us an idea of all the different ramifications and the depth of water issues. And so, we learn a lot from their articles and the articles that they feature in.
Now that this was just launched a few months ago, I'm really curious to hear about already future plans and how the platform might evolve and what you might be adding.
We're planning to host some peer-to-peer gatherings between the members of the directory. There's folks in the community that have raised, it's great to be part of it, but I would also like to connect with all of these experts. And so, while that's not the main purpose of the Color Water, that's definitely something that we can facilitate and that we will facilitate. And we're also thinking about how to build a collective voice. Our main purpose is to elevate all of the voices of all these individual experts, but we're also trying to facilitate how to build a collective voice, which is so important in these times, is to have a shared understanding and to have a shared voice that can resonate, out there. And last but not least, we've received feedback, and we invite feedback from all the people visiting and using the directory. And so we're about to launch a new section called Trending Topics. So what are some of the most pressing issues that people are interested in searching for? And we're going to have a list of 4 or 5 trending topics, so that if you're a journalist or a decision maker or just an expert trying to find out something about a topic that just emerged, that will be easier to find. But yeah, please visit the website, and please reach out to me for any questions and any comments.
I definitely encourage people to check this out. I encourage journalists to tap into it. I encourage people planning water conferences and meetings to tap into this and, increase the diversity of speakers. And I encourage people just to come in here and check it out too, and look at the reflections section. Great stories and knowledge in there. And so it looks like the main site is colorofwater.waterhub.org. And people can go there and visit it. So, Jose, I'm glad we caught up on this. I think it's an awesome tool, and I know you guys are just getting started. Like you said, you just released it at the end of 2022, so it's going to be exciting to see how it grows and the impact it has over time.
And thank you so much for the opportunity, Travis.
Waterloop.
Thanks for listening to this podcast, and thanks to Springpoint Partners for supporting the Waterloop nonprofit media outlet. To find all episodes, sign up for email updates, and connect on social media, visit waterloop.org.